So number one is someone whose surname I don't even know. But if any of my friends listen to this, it will make them chuckle. It's a person who we all knew as Toby Hat.
Toby
And
Hat.
Toby Hat was called Toby Hat because we used to see him every Friday at the club we went to, nightclub we went to, and he'd be on a podium dancing, and he'd always wear some sort of noticeable hat, like a kind of rave days Jamiroquai kind of guy,
Okay, gotcha.
but less cool and without necessarily the same moves. Um, but Toby Hat, I'm using to kind of represent, and he just came to mind when I was thinking about a really influential period of my life. Toby Hat, I'm using to represent kind of everybody who I met during my sort of early clubbing days, and the kind of, and specifically that being kind of early house music, dance music, when clubbing was still seen. And there's lots of things I could say about that. There's some very specific things that I kind of wanted to say about the people I met in that period and the kind of impact it had on me. So Toby Hat is number one, and I can tell you more about those people that he represents. I told you.
Oh, absolutely. I really want to know. I mean, I'm from that. I think we're roughly the same age, aren't we? I spent most of my youth in because I was in a band, so I was always going to live music venues.
Right.
So I spent most of my youth there, or maybe in festivals and stuff like that. But I love dancing, Jess. Honestly, I love like clubs and dance music and just letting yourself go and just dancing till, I don't know, you can't do it anymore. And every now and then, if there's a wedding or any excuse, I mean, it's embarrassing probably for everybody, but I don't care. I just love to dance. So I do want to know more about this. So was it a big group of you that used to go? Was it?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of part of it, really. It started off being actually some friends that I'd met at college who are still incredibly dear friends now. But it ended up being a big group of people who are people who have always been my closest friends since that time. Because we sort of, our group of friends sort of randomly collected another group of friends, and then we all kind of collected each other, and they've become people who are, some of the most important people in my life. You see, I could cry now. This is probably the hardest to talk about. But that, I think there was a few things around that time. I think, and I'm sure there's a thing where everyone at every age thinks that the bit they went through was like the best bit.
Yeah, the
But I
best
definitely
era.
feel like there was a real sense of sort of togetherness and camaraderie at that time. And I think for me, the reason that it was so influential is, I mean, loads of reasons. One, that it felt very much like a kind of group of people who were part of a tribe. And actually, I'd never really felt like that before.
Yeah.
I was into football, but just that sense of sort of we're doing something together, and it's got an importance other than just we're going dancing. It felt like it was part of a sort of cultural thing. But I think it's also, up until a certain time in your life, a lot of the people that you end up being friends with, they're kind of, and this is nothing against, I've got, still got friends from school and all those other things, but they're sort of, they're friends who are kind of, you've ended up becoming friends with because they're part of the institutions around you, whether that be your neighborhood or whether that be the school you went to, or whether that be the fact your parents were friends. And actually, I think there was kind of, I don't know, like this idea of suddenly meeting people who were connected by something cultural, rather than being imposed or logical like all the other people I'd met. It was a different community and but it had an incredibly strong, rich sense of community. And it was very, very open. People wanted to meet each other. People wanted to find out each other. And people kind of were, I mean, I throw this word around quite a lot, actually. I think people just wanted to love each other. They really did. They wanted to make friendships. They wanted to smile with people. And I really kind of think it made me a very open person emotionally. See, I could go again.
There you go.
But that's kind of why I wanted to talk about Toby Hat, because that kind of period was, I think, quite formative for me in how I am and how I treat people and how I approach friendships, which is probably all too like excited puppy.
Oh, I can relate completely. I'm still that now, and I know you are too. Well, Toby Hat, he's sort of like your emblem, isn't he? He's your sort of poster boy for that period
He
of
was
your
always
life.
there. He was
And I
always
love-
there. He was always on the ped, and we get there, we're like, Toby Hat's here. It's all
Yeah.
like, we know what's going on. We're all good.
There were about 4 names that came to mind immediately, and then a few others for that kind of final spot. But what also struck me was there's probably about 100 people who I could say have influenced or shaped my life in some way without them knowing. And they were very small encounters, and sometimes they're complete strangers who I met for 20 minutes. Or have met traveling somewhere, or there were many teachers that came to mind, teachers at school and sixth form. So there's so many of those small encounters, and I actually did want to mention that. I wanted to kind of give a nod to the fact that I've been influenced by people that, sometimes I've met very briefly and I've never known their name and they've never known my name, and that's the impact that person can have. So it was a really, really lovely process to go through, actually, to think about the people who have been significant in some way or still part of my life, and all of the hundreds of people along the way who have had some impact or influence on me.
Well, I'm really pleased to hear that, because, one of the sub-agendas for this is to get people to think and to sort of stop and go, gosh, I don't know, actually. I was in a situation the other day, and somebody popped into my head who, this happens often, this one person, and you mentioned about a fleeting moment. This person, I spoke to them for less than 10 minutes once at an event 3 or 4 years ago. And I was, I'm always hurting myself, Jindy. I'm always got some injury. And I was complaining about something. That's typical of me. And he just looked at me and he went, well, there's no shortcut. It's basically strength conditioning and balancing. And body balancing. That's it. Strength conditioning and body balancing. And I don't know how many times I've thought about that since. That one thought that just comes every time I've got a little kind of ache and pain. I go, right, strength conditioning, body balancing, get down the gym, sort yourself out. And it's just that one fleeting chance encounter that's made such a difference. So I get you completely on that.
Yeah, and if I might just tell a very brief story.
Sure.
We had one of our groups, men's groups, last night, and Monday night, and we were talking about spirituality, and I described this experience. I won't tell the whole story because it's quite long, but I had this experience hiking Kilimanjaro about 16 years ago. And there was a woman on the trip who did Reiki, and I was a skeptic about those sorts of things. I was firmly in my management consulting days back then. And on the last day of the trip, I had a back spasm. She healed it with Reiki in a way that makes no rational sense at all. And that experience, I think, cracked something open in me in the way I saw the world and the way that I realized there was far more to the world than I understood through my kind of rational, logical lens. And her name's Liz. And, I've never kept in touch with her, but I had this incredible, meaningful experience just for 11 days. In that brief moment, which was about 10 minutes, that I think shifted me onto a slightly different path.
I know. People, they got a habit of doing things like that. And I'm glad you mentioned Kilimanjaro, because I know in your summary you kind of just laid out the sort of core focuses of your work, but in your writing and me just following you around, there's so much to you. I mean, I love the idea of that. I think you wrote once about riding down the west coast of America or something, just getting on your bike and riding.
Yeah.
And I think how you found that so freeing and transformative. And I think it led to a life change, didn't it? You kind of went off in a different direction after that. Yeah,
that was about, when was that? About 10, 12 years ago. And that was the last time I had a full-time permanent job and wasn't self-employed. And I was working for a consulting firm and been on this great journey with them, helped them to grow rapidly in size, but it was starting to feel quite claustrophobic again. And I just asked for a sabbatical. So can I have 3 months off? And they gave me 3 months off, unpaid. And I've felt this call to adventure. Don't know where it came from, but I just felt this real desire to get into some sort of wildness, some sort of nature, some sort of challenge. So I decided I was going to cycle down the west coast of the States, US, and I didn't even own a bike at the time. So I kind of ordered this bike and it arrived 2 months before I left. And my girlfriend at the time decided to come with me. And so we spent 5 weeks cycling from Seattle to San Francisco, which was about 1,000 miles. And again, that trip came up when I was thinking about this, because we met so many people along the way, and seeing the way they lived and the way they treated us, and there was so much generosity, that experience fundamentally changed me, for sure. Not to mention the whole kind of being outdoors every day for 5 weeks. And so I came back a different person, and I came back, and my first day back on this consulting assignment I was on, which was in a bank in Canary Wharf, I knew in my body that I just couldn't do it anymore. I physically felt it the moment I walked through the doors. And so I quit within a few days, and I had nothing lined up. And then, while I was working my gardening leave, a friend called me up and said, "Oh, I'm doing this project over here. You fancy coming to help me out as a freelancer?" And then off I went. But that trip, I came back from that trip quite a different person. I didn't realize it at the time, but a very different person. And I felt completely untethered to all of the boxes I put myself in my day-to-day life. So it really was a truly transformative experience.
Okay, so number 2 is going to be Leonie Dawson, who is an Australian woman who I've never met in real life and has just had this very strange connection to my life in many, many ways. So she is a blogger, first and foremost, an author, a creator of a women's entrepreneurial school, should we call it that? I think it's now called the Shining Business Academy. She keeps changing the name of it, so I'm not sure what it's called exactly now. So I first came across her back in the days of the blogosphere when I read Christiane Northrup's book, Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, which was one of the seminal texts. Sorry, not seminal equals semen. Very influential texts of my life. It's there in our language.
I've never thought about that before.
So, and she refers to this. She has this paragraph about the creative rainbow mother. It's an archetype. She writes about how she struggled with motherhood, especially early motherhood, and felt this deep longing to do her work as well as be a mother, and this constant tearing between those two parts of herself, which a lot of her friends didn't experience. And I was like, yep, me too. And so she quotes this passage from this book. So I managed to find that book, and that didn't have anything more about it. And I was like, oh no. And then, so I put it into Google. And the only thing that shows up is this blog post from this Australian woman called Leonie Dawson, who says she too feels this creative rainbow mother archetype, and just, writes a little bit about her life and how she experiences. I'm like, yes. So I follow her. And then that's it. Like, it goes dead. There's nothing else about it. And I hadn't done much work with archetypes before. They hadn't really meant much to me. But this was like a light bulb went on over. This is my experience. This has been given a name. Why the hell isn't there more out there about it? So I wrote the book. So that was my first book, The Rainbow Way, Cultivating Creativity in the Midst of Motherhood. Because when I'd just given birth to my son, and I felt this whoosh of creative energy, which for the previous probably 6 years, I'd managed to tamp it down and try really hard to be normal while I was doing my degrees. I mean, I don't do normal very well, but I tried really hard because I had identified that my mental health stuff and my creativity were part of the same thing. So if I shut down the creativity, then the mental health stuff would go down too. And I would be normal and I'd fit in and happily ever after. So something about pregnancy and the hormones of that said, you're not doing that anymore. So I requested that somebody get me The Artist's Way, because I was aware of this as a book that people say was life-changing. This is how you access your creativity. So I read it, and you know what? There were so many men in it. There were very few women, and there were almost no mothers. And so she was giving all these suggestions, and I was like, but I've got a tiny baby. I don't have a day that I can go and have an artist state. I don't even have half of an hour that I can have an artist state. What do I do? What about me?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And so that's why I wrote my book. My book is like The Artist's Way, but for creative mothers who are feeling that urgent yearning to create, to express themselves, to be more than just mothers, and don't have the time, the energy, the space. How do you do it?
Yeah.
And so I reached out to my heroines in my real life and in my that I've read, and I interviewed them and I said, how do you do it? What do you do? So that was the first of my books that combined my experience, archetypal psychology, research into the struggles of creative motherhood, why women, especially mothers, are totally left out of the art world, and the lived experience of real women and how they manage it. And so Leonie was a guiding light for that. So I reached out to her and I said, would you write the foreword to this? And she did. And I joined her business, I don't know what you call it, like her academy. It's an online business school specifically for women, because business skills have usually been the domain of men. You go to business school, it's very left-brained, and it's very logical and rational. And a lot of women get really freaked out about, oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm not this, I'm not that, but I really want to do something, or I really want to, have an income stream, or I really want to self-publish, but I don't know how. And she is just such a good permission giver. Like, she's like me, she's resource heavy. So she reads, she processes a huge amount and then splurges it out in a far more accessible way that doesn't feel intimidating, doesn't feel scary. So you get all the kind of the nuts and bolts that you need. And as a doer and as a geeky person, I love that because it's very practical. But she also gives you the spiritual encouragement of, you can do this, I see you, you've got a big dream and you're making it happen, and really just talking to that imposter syndrome and that negative self-talk that can happen for women. And she packages it in this most beautiful rainbow color, hand-drawn stuff, which again speaks totally to my aesthetic. And it was this woman who is a multi-millionaire from what she's done, doing it on her terms, working 4 days a week, having her kids, doing what she's passionate about, stopping, reinventing herself, doing something else. And she was a real permission giver for me in how to do business in the world as yourself, as your strange, interesting, quirky self.
Okay, number one, cashier number one, coming in at number one is Stan Laurel.
Oh, okay.
Of Laurel and Hardy fame and beauty. Stan Laurel is my all-time comic hero. He's like a factory default setting of a serious happy place for me. Just his face makes me happy. I mentioned there's a gallery, people like Dick Van Dyke. I know Dick Van Dyke was asked by Stan Laurel if ever there was a biopic of his life, would he like to play him? My first ever theatre notice was wonderful comic timing with shades of Stan Laurel. So I took that compliment when I first did a Chekhov play. I was playing a hapless hypochondriac called Lomov. But anyway, why I love Stan Laurel so much is I was 7 years old and living in Uganda, and I lived in Uganda between my being 2.5 and 10. And round about 6, 7 years old, there was a black and white TV set that hummed into action. And then onto the screen, traversing the screen, was Stan Laurel. And he just made me immediately happy. I mean, the duo is the partnership and the collaboration is so important, because Laurel and Hardy are my perfect collaborative comedy duo, I think. But Stan Laurel particularly reminds me a bit of my grandfather. He's just very in my DNA. He reminds me to keep it kind, to keep it humble, to keep it funny, to keep it hapless, And I love slapstick, just the haplessness. And then when the brick sort of slaps Oliver Hardy on the head, if they're doing things in a chimney stack or whatever, the breaking of the fourth wall and, looking straight to camera as you share their pain. They just did it perfectly for me.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
to this day, Stan Laurel is like a Chris Grimes factory default setting of a serious, happy being an entity. And he's so informed. I mean, Laurel and Hardy, there are a couple of favourite films. I think it was County Hospital I first saw. But then there's a wonderful, wonderful one I've discovered and been reminded of. Laurel and Hardy's Brats is where they're playing their own children. And the technology of the day was they made these gargantuan props, so an extra large, chair, extra large bed, so they could become miniature. And it informed the comedy improvisation company that I now run called Instant Wit, which I've been doing for 35 years now. It's called Instant Wit, and there's a hilarious pun on Instant Whip. And the first ever photographs we ever did, inspired by Laurel and Hardy, is we miniaturized ourselves because of a hilarious pun of Instant Whip, Instant Wit, into a bowl of blancmange. And of course, that was all done with digital technology, and we just did a JPEG miniaturization. Whereas I was really enamored by the fact that back in the day, they would have made those enormous props. So I was thinking macro when we went micro. So anyway, it's informed me in so many ways and keeps on doing it.
Oh, wonderful choice. Uganda. I didn't know about that. We're going to go on to Stan Laurel in a minute.
Yeah.
But I want to know about Uganda first, because I didn't know that about you. What drew you
asked
there?
before?
Oh, where did you grow up?
So I was born up north at a place near. When you talk about where you're born, you end up saying a bigger place, then get smaller. So I'll cut to. I was born in a place called Saltburn, which is close to Redcar, which is close to Middlesbrough, an area of which is called Northamptonshire, where my parents were from. And at my age equivalent of 28, and I'm 62 now, but my mum and dad emigrated to Uganda with 3 children under the age of 8. Of which I was one, to Uganda. And my dad was the first of his family to go to university. He achieved a bit of social mobility. My dad is going to be one of my people, but I'll tell you, I'll keep my powder dry about that. But yes, my dad was a teacher for the British Council, and between my being 2.5 and 10, I lived in Uganda. And then, if you those that know the history, it's just been recently the 50th anniversary of this, but we lived in a time of the political coup when Idi Amin overthrew Milton Obote. All the Ugandan Asians were kicked out of the country, and I was living in a place called Jinja, Jinja, which is 50 miles away from Kampala, and the fighting was getting closer. And the disappearances were becoming more prevalent, and so it was a dangerous time. And so we got out of there lickety split.
Wow.
Yes, it's very, very formative, very exciting time. By bizarre coincidence, I was also friends with the 2 younger brothers of Adrian Edmondson of
Yes,
comic fame, because his parents too were in Uganda as well at the same time.
Okay, fine. We'll look forward to hearing a bit more about that when we speak about your dad. So back to Stan Laurel.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. I grew up, I'm a little bit younger than you, but I grew up with Laurel and Hardy. And I don't know, there are still people with funny bones like that. People that you can just look at and laugh before they do anything. And I remember that famous sort of stage walk-on by Spike Milligan where the audience just laughed for minutes, and he hadn't done anything yet because he just had funny bones. He walked on the stage and they just couldn't stop laughing. And I think Stan Laurel definitely had that. And I love, my favourite one was the one where they just ate the boiled eggs in hospital. I mean,
yes, that's County Hospital. That's the
that's
first.
That's the one I think. Yeah, and I'm just thinking, if you said to a youngster now, we fell over ourselves when we were kids and still would now, about a guy just eating boiled eggs and putting salt and pepper on. And I mean, there's
that famous line of hard-boiled eggs and nuts. And you can't believe that he's come to hospital and brought him just hard-boiled eggs and nuts. And then he just doesn't give them to Oliver Hardy. He just sits there nomming them for himself.
It's just genius.
Beautiful comic business.
Absolute geniuses. Wonderful. Well done.
And this is sort of 2012 going into 2013. A guy called Asmat started City Mapper, and I never took the bus in London before City Mapper. And I think originally it was called Bus Mapper because you just tracked the buses.
Okay.
And the buses in London were just such a mystery to me. But then Asmat came along with Bus Mapper, now City Mapper, which everybody knows and everybody uses. And I mean, I use it every time I'm in London. It's wonderful. Used it yesterday. So Asmat came along to an early 9 Others dinner, and coincidentally, I actually emailed him yesterday, and that was part of an email chain that I did at the beginning of the year, but then pinged him again yesterday, and he was like, yeah, I still remember the dinners, and he's no longer at City Mapper anymore. It got acquired and whatnot. But, that went on from, Asmat with his app in 2011, 2012 to everybody knowing about City Mapper. I mean, it's just wonderful. And he was back then when he came along to some 9 Other dinners and one of the parties, he was just so focused on making that product the best it could be.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you mention that kind of thing, somebody says, well, can't Google Maps do that? Or can't this do that? Or can't that do that? And you kind of think, yeah, and that taught me something. And it was like, yes, it can. But he was just so focused on making it a good user experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what made the difference. So he's one. The second that I always think of is the early team at Uber.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this is like 2012. Uber is in a few cities in America. They've had some really good funding. I think they'd had about like 40 million in funding at the time. So, good startup company, fast growing, but nothing like they are now. And yet I was connected to someone called Ryan Graves, who was the original CEO of Uber when it was like one of Travis's side projects. Ryan was the CEO, and then he once it started to take off, Travis became the CEO, and Ryan was the global GM. And he came over to London to kind of wonder whether they would set up in London first when they came to Europe, or would they surround London and then do London last. So I was connected with him, and then he hung around for a bit and did his thing, and then they decided they were going to go for London, and then their launch team came over. A guy called Sam or someone called Duval, and they came to 9 Others as well because they knew they had to sort of connect with the tech scene and the early adopters back in the spring of 2012. So helped them. I got them speaking gigs at other networking events. They came to 9 Others to kind of talk about how to sort of seed Uber in the app and get people using it. At the time, it was just fancy S-Class Mercedes. And it was remarkable. Again, a bit like Asmat's City Mapper in a different kind of way. It was such a magical product, magical piece of tech. You could call up your Uber and you could look at your phone and you'd see the car on the map coming around the corner. Yeah. So then you'd walk out the building. This S-Class would roll up. The guy would get out, open the door, you'd get in, and then you'd go to your destination. And then at the other end, you'd roll up at the doorway of your destination in this nice S-Class. And the guy would get out, you'd open the door and you'd jump out and you'd leave. And you didn't have to sort out any payment or anything like that. And it was just so magical. So they came along early on.
Can I just, before you go into your third one, can I just jump in on that one? Because I've mentioned this before on my podcast, but I lived in India for a while, nearly 5 years. And when I first went, the only way to get around was they're called black and yellows, these little sort of, little cabs. And of course, I'm straight off the aeroplane with no Hindi whatsoever. And also the road names in Mumbai are fairly, let's just say even the locals struggle with it's all landmark based. So it's not even like you give an address, you give a landmark next to an address. So I really struggled that first year. I couldn't really go that many places because I couldn't communicate with the taxi driver. And then actually before Uber came along, there was a company called Meru, and similar to Uber, but it was like a sort of an earlier version of it. And it just changed my life. And then when Uber came to Mumbai, there was no stopping me, Matthew. I was everywhere. for that convenience reason, everything's mapped out. You don't have to do anything. And you're right, at the time, it was like, how is this so transformative from the experience before? So for you to have been part of that story a bit, connected with it somehow, must be thrilling when you see now that it's literally, the most ubiquitous, travel app in the world.
It was incredible.